Good morning, everyone. My name is Zachary Cullum. I'm an outreach coordinator for the Southwest region with the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just as a reminder, your microphones and cameras should already be turned off automatically, but make sure, if you wouldn't mind, just keeping them both off on the session. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat and we will try to answer them as time permits. Additionally, a copy of all the presentations and recordings of each of the sessions will be available on the Commission's website, so you can always refer to that if you need to. The full education value convening agenda and the links to the breakout sessions are available on the Commission website too. So, and I will include that link in the chat. So thank you so much again for joining us today. I'm going to hand it over to Josh Garrison and he will take it from here.
I am muted. 2 years into the pandemic, you'd figure I'd figure this one out. So good morning, everyone. Again, as Zach said, I'm Josh Garrison. I'm the Associate Commissioner for Public Policy here at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. And part of my role is overseeing the state's or the Commission's legislative agenda, as well as our financial aid program implementation. So it is my privilege today to talk about what the Commission will be trying to do this upcoming legislative session, as well as some larger policy initiatives that we are going to be putting on. Just some housekeeping on this. At the end of each section, I will pause and answer any questions that are there. So please put whatever questions you have in the chat. I'll do the best. Additionally, we're using the social media influencer lights in here, and they're not made for bald men. So I apologize for kind of the halo that is on me right now with that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started here. Please, at any point in time, if you have questions, let me know. Zach, since I can only see my presentation, can you let me know if you can see the slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, with that started, I will go ahead and get going. And again, my name is Josh Garrison, Associate Commissioner for Public Policy. I'm going to give an overview of our legislative and policy preview for the upcoming calendar year here. We're going to talk about our legislative timeline, so what that'll look like here for the upcoming budget session, some changes we are seeking to the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship, the Higher Education Purple Star designation, which we are looking to duplicate from efforts being done in other states, the annual attempted a FAFSA requirement that we see each year at the Indiana General Assembly and what that would look like. And then 3 policy initiatives, a direct or pre-admission initiative that we are starting to work with our institutions on, 21st Century Scholars auto enrollment or enrollment simplification, something hopefully many of you have heard of. And then the Franco-Banning grant increase that was just approved by the State Budget Committee earlier this year. So with that, I am going to go ahead and jump into our legislative timeline, just so you all can understand what we're looking at for the timing of these future changes. So the legislative sessions officially began on November 22nd, which is Organization Day. It brought in all of the new members of the General Assembly, and we heard from both chambers on what their upcoming priorities would be. We heard quite a bit on education and workforce initiatives being part of that, and we hope that we'll see increased higher education funding. This is a budget session. For those of you that are not aware, Indiana has a biennial budget, so every 2 years there is a budget session. So this session will run all the way to April 27th, or at the latest statutorily April 29th, but it's slated to end by April 27th. And that budget will run for 2 years. So this will be the longer session, whereas in the even number years, it is a shorter session of only a few months where it's mainly just policy changes and cannot impact the budget. We will see both the Senate and the House reconvening on January 9th, right after the new year, and the first half of session ends on March 1st. So after the first half, we should have a pretty good idea of where everything sits. With that, the Commission's priority this legislative session will be seeking additional funding for our institutions. The Commission approved, and we presented Commissioner Lowry presented last week at the State Budget Committee requests for a 6% in the first year of the biennium and an 8% increase in funding the second year of the biennium. Part of that being outcomes-based funding, performance funding, the other part just being a base adjustment, knowing that we need additional funding for our higher education institutions due to cuts caused by inflation. So With that, I'm trying to monitor the chat on my phone, and I don't think we have any questions yet on that. So to kick off, I think one of the top items that we've heard about over the last 6, 7, 8 sessions is teacher scholarships and teacher shortages. In 2016, then Speaker Brian Bosma proposed what was called the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship. And this scholarship provides $30,000 for quote unquote high achieving students who wish to enter the teaching profession. It provides up to $7,500 per year. So for 4 years, it's $30,000. In exchange, the students must agree to teach in the state of Indiana for 5 years, or they have to pay back a portion of the scholarship that they receive. To qualify for the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship, you have to either have a top 20% ACT or SAT score, you have to be in the top 20% of your class, or you have to have a 3.5 GPA. It's not all the above, it's one of those three. There's priority given to recent high school graduates, and as of last year, there is a additional priority given to low-income students, as well as students who are pursuing high-need fields within education. The program launched again, passed in 2016, with the first cohort receiving the scholarship in 2016 and the 2017-2018 academic year. The program has been extremely successful with right now for the first 2 cohorts, over 90% of those students are either in the classroom or are pursuing additional education towards a master's in education or some sort of education related program, over 90%. One of the problems is we are statutorily capped at 200 recipients per year. We can only provide up to 200 new students with the scholarship. What has happened, though, is that as students do change majors, or as students more often with this program graduate actually early, or if a student is a sophomore when they receive the scholarship and can only use 2 years of it, what happens is there's leftover funds. And because of that, we've left over $1 million last year unspent for the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Scholarship. What we want to do this session is remove that 200 recipient cap and award it to as many students as we can actually fund. The program actually had a record number of applicants last year, with over 600 students applying, and that's 600 students who actually qualified. So more students are interested who do not meet the qualifications, but over 600 students who met one of those 3 academic requirements. Over 600 students applied. So we know that there's a population that we can serve in addition to what we already are serving. So with that, we are looking, like I said, to remove that cap and think we can probably help about 30 or 40 more students per year with those changes. With that, I'm going to pause for a second and go to the chat and see if there's any questions. And it looks like there's one that is performance-based funding going to change for fiscal year 24 regarding individualized growth metric. I'm not going to touch too far into what we're looking at doing for outcomes-based performance funding. At the end, you'll have my email. And if you want to shoot me an email, I'll send you all the changes we're looking to do on our outcomes-based performance funding model for the upcoming biennia and what that will look like. With the conversation today, a little too in the weeds to get into how that's going to look, but happy to have that conversation. Moving on, wanted to talk about the higher education Purple Star designation. We know that our campuses provide numerous supports for veterans on campus, but oftentimes the veterans don't know how they're accessed or where they're at. In addition to that, we have heard from veteran groups across the state that they're not aware of what is being done on the individual campuses. So what the commission is proposing is working with our Indiana Department of Veteran Affairs, the institutions themselves, and the veteran groups that we historically have worked with to identify the supports that each campus must offer to receive a designation as a higher education Purple Star campus. This designation, the Purple Star designation at least, started as a K-12 program, and there are Purple Star K-12 programs across the nation, including here in the state of Indiana. Ohio is the first state that we know of that expanded this program to the post-secondary level. And what we want to do is have the ability for our veteran students and their families when they attend campus know that the campus that they're attending is prepared to serve them and what those services are. So we will be working with our veterans group that we're forming. Actually, right now, I think we just have the list approved, and we're going to seek a legislative designation for these campuses. One of the items that is often brought up or talked about, again, I won't dive too far in the weeds on this, is what's called the Joint Services Transcript, or the JST. And the JST shows what a service member has learned during their time in the military. How campuses handle the JST is very different. The same student at one campus may get 30 credits towards their degree, but they may go to a different campus and get only 3 or 6 or sometimes even no credits for their prior learning. So we want to work with our campuses to identify how we can best serve these students and recognize the benefit and the education they received while they were in the military, and hopefully help them graduate on time and early. So we will be working to seek a designation for our campuses on that. I'm going to go back to the chat real quick to see if there's any questions, and doesn't appear unless I miss one. Zach, let me know.
There is
item,
one.
Yep.
They were asking, what are some of the factors that left the funds unspent in regards to the Next Generation Hoosier Educator Award?
So some of the factors that left is so we offer each student $30,000 for 4 years. So college students can receive the scholarship. So you can actually apply up until your sophomore year. So a student who received the scholarship for 2 years would only receive $15,000, leaving another $15,000 on the table for other students. We do have some students who graduate in 3 years because these are typically very high achieving students, as well as fortunately very few, but some do change their major or decide that they're not going to continue pursuing post-secondary education. So that is what's left on the funding on the table. The biggest contributor to that is the fact that college freshmen and college sophomores receive that and either leave $15,000 or $30,000 unspent because they have already graduated on that. So that's the big reason. Thank you for that question. So the FAFSA requirement, over the past few years, you've seen, or maybe you haven't seen, but the General Assembly has debated whether or not to require the FAFSA for as part of high school graduation. We have supported this requirement with a broad opt-out provision. And the broad opt-out provision is typically if you want to opt out, you can. It's gone before the General Assembly for 4 years, making it to either through the House or through the Senate and to conference committee multiple times, but it hasn't passed. Right now, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, New Hampshire, Colorado, Maryland, Illinois, and California all have this requirement. And with this, you can see it's not really a red or a blue state issue. It's kind of a bipartisan issue. The reason that we support this has to do with the equity of FAFSA completion. When we look at who is completing the FAFSA, the top schools are the schools with the lowest free and reduced lunch rate. When we look at the schools with the lowest FAFSA completion, and they are the schools with our highest free and reduced lunch rate. As a matter of fact, we did a study a couple of years ago. We looked at the top 25 schools and with FAFSA filing at that point, and none of them had a even above average free and reduced lunch rate. The fact of the matter is, we know those students face additional barriers, and we understand that this will be work for high school students, and we're prepared, or high schools, and we're prepared to help them. But the fact of the matter is, we're missing many students who want to go on to post-secondary education, but just don't have the opportunity because they're either not aware of the FAFSA or do not have the support to complete it. Last year, it is estimated by NCAN that we've left over $60 million on the table by students not filing the FAFSA. Not sure if this one will make it through again this year. As I said, we've tried for 4 years with our partners at the Indiana Chamber and others, but we will be working to see if we can't get this one passed in Illinois as well, or Illinois, I'm sorry, in Indiana as well. One of the reasons it's so important is if you look at our FAFSA completions over the last few years, and I used fall 2019 to fall 2022 as at the end of November, our overall FAFSA filing rate has dropped by 20%. For high school seniors, it's down about 12%, and renewals are down about 23% over that course in time. Now, for for the overall and for the renewals, we would expect there to be some percent decline because the number of individuals in college have gone down. That's just what's happened over the last 3 years. The seniors are a little concerning, although there's room to make that up. And this year's senior class is a little bit smaller than the class that would have graduated. That would have been in spring 2020 when that group would have graduated. On a positive note, we are up this year. Our overall FAFSA filing rate compared to last year is up 10%. And for seniors, it's up 3%, with the renewals leading the way. That one, we're trying to figure out why the renewals are so ahead. For one, some of our campuses have done a great job of reaching out to their current students to make sure that they renew. The other thing is, although we do have a strong economy right now, there may be fears that it is going to wane and people are considering going back for additional education, as well as the marketplace has been rewarding higher education significantly over the last couple of years. So with that, we're seeing increased in renewals on that. We think that a FAFSA filing requirement will help those seniors. And you heard Commissioner Lowry talk earlier about the declining college going rate, catching those students who are no longer going and hopefully getting them to enroll in post-secondary education. With that, I'll pause for any questions. Is there a plan to simplify the FAFSA to help lower common barriers? Well, actually, the federal government announced that with the 24-25 FAFSA that there will be FAFSA simplification. It was supposed to happen with the 23-24 FAFSA, one that's open right now, but they delayed implementation 1 year. Currently, the FAFSA sits around 108 questions. The goal is to get it down to 36 questions by that point in time. In addition to simplifying the FAFSA and removing those questions, there's going to be a direct connection with the IRS, even simpler than what we're seeing with what's called the data retrieval tool right now, to ensure all students have that information ported over directly, so they don't have to answer all those questions about, what the income and all that. We will see if they're able to launch that by next spring or next fall, I apologize, and what that ultimately will look like over the course of the spring. They're supposed to roll out information. So we're anxiously awaiting. In addition, the way that Pell is awarded is going to be greatly simplified, with maximum Pell and minimum Pells being based on actually the adjusted gross income. So what will happen is juniors will actually, not all juniors, but many juniors will be able to know what their Pell Grant award will be prior to the end of their junior year based on their taxes that they file. So kind of exciting aspect of the financial aid world coming up. And there will be a lot of information coming in the spring into the fall around those changes. Next, I wanted to mention our pre-admission model for the class of what will be the class of 2024 and what we're aiming to do. And some of you may have heard of a pre-admissions or a direct admissions model. Here at the commission, we are leaning towards a pre-admission title to minimize confusion. And what we want to do is take the data that we have through the Department of Education, the data we have here at the commission, and allow every high school senior to be notified of the colleges and universities here in the state of Indiana that they qualify for admittance. So using pretty blunt metrics, we understand this, what would be sixth semester or end of junior year GPA, and their SAT score based on the fact that all high school juniors now take the SAT, what colleges that they automatically are going to be admitted into without additional issues or items, because we do know those are blunt metrics and some more students will get in past those. So starting fall of 23, we plan on notifying the seniors, starting with a postcard saying, hey, there's going to be a letter coming that's going to say you've been automatically admitted to these institutions, or you've been pre-admitted to these institutions, and then a follow-up letter after likely Labor Day to say, here are the institutions that you have been pre-admitted to. We are working with our colleges and universities right now to identify which ones will participate, and we're working out a lot of the kinks and barriers with this. As I mentioned, we're going to use doing this in partnership with the institutions and the Indiana Department of Education to let students know of their options. As I said, they will receive that letter, and the plan is right now to link them to a landing page, which will say either go to the Common App, which we have most of our institutions on, or if a student or if an institution is not participating in the Common App, having a link directly to the institution's admissions process. We have been following these type of initiatives for a few years now, and most promising was the one launched in Idaho. Now, Idaho has quite a few, they have less institutions than we do, and it's more centralized than our state. But their first year, they saw an 8% increase in first-time undergraduate enrollment, an 8% increase. We know that we can do the same, and this is not, or this initiative was hoping to target that decline in college going that we've talked about. We've talked about, you heard Commissioner Lowry mention earlier on, we went from 65% down to 53% over the course of 5 years. We know we can get those 12% back, and then hopefully some more. And this, we believe, is an opportunity to let students who may not think they're college material know that they are able to go to post-secondary education. As you can imagine, the toughest portion of this will be the communication of it, will be the letter. And we're working through various issues as we try to figure out how we're going to communicate that. Those issues being, how do we deal with diploma types? So how do we deal with Core 40 general, Core 40 with academic honors, selective programs? Just because you get this letter doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be admitted into a highly selective, let's say, nursing program or an engineering program or the Kelley School of Business. That's not going to be the way that this works. But using those cutoffs, it would allow the student to know that they can get into some program. We want to make sure that we're communicating correctly with our special education population, understanding the administrative capacity of our campuses. Do we, and how do we, if we do, how do we try to reach homeschool students? The fun of data sharing agreements to make sure this information is protected, the merit aid timeline, and then how we deal with items like conditional admittance. So schools sometimes will admit a student who does not have the requisite qualifications, knowing that they go to a summer bridge or some other program. So we're working through these various issues, and you'll hear more about this in the spring on this pre-admission initiative, and we're hoping that this will be something positive that students and parents and families can look forward to each spring, and we hope to build upon this in the coming years after the first initial rollout. With that, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions on that. Has there been greater college going rate for honors diploma? I know their first year retention rates are significantly higher than Core 40 recipients. Yes, so the college going rate for honors diploma is higher for those. And actually, I have our college readiness report right in front of me, and I'm not going to go find that in here. But if you go to our commission website and go to reports and analysis and our college readiness report, it does have the college going rate for the honors students in there versus the other programs. So I would encourage you to look at these. Sean Tierney and our data team do an absolutely amazing job. They're second to none in the nation in the amount of the data and the type of data that they put out, breaking down what we do. So would encourage you to go to that. Zach, how are we doing on time?
We are at 11:03.
And this, what time does this go to?
This goes to
Oh, you're looking that up?
12:25.
Okay, so I'm good on time. Could the pre-admission notification include estimates of how much need-based aid? Tracy, you've read our mind. So the plan on this is when it's lining up with FAFSA simplification. So what we're hoping to do, and mind you, we're in the very early stages of what this letter will look like, but what we're hoping to do is on the one side, here are the institutions that you've admitted to, or been admitted to, all those type pre-admitted to. I've got to work on the language myself again, pre-admitted to. But on the other side, here are estimates, an easy tool for them to see how they how much they would qualify based on the Pell chart at that point, either for automatic full Pell or low Pell on that. How will this work for selective institutions that do holistic admission reviews? It's a great question. We are working with the institutions on that. Tracy, I agree. I think this will be a great opportunity for many students who don't know that college is both in their reach and affordable for them. Although I don't think I'm supposed to use the word affordable anymore based on the previous presentation. With that, how will this selective institution do holistic reviews? So we are working with our holistic campuses, or our campuses that have more selective programs or higher items. No institution is required to participate in this program, and if we cannot find a solution to that, then we will not. They likely will not be part of the program. So there is a way to set cutoff scores for some sort of admission. Like I said, we are still working with institutions. We have campus we're meeting again with tomorrow as we work out the final details, and we will provide information about how that will be done as we finalize those. But we do know that right now we have quite a few institutions that are raring to go on this one as we work out the communication questions. So Dennis, we'll make sure that we communicate how that's how all these items, all the barriers that I identified here, the selective programs and others, how those are all addressed once that's all worked out. So 21st Century Scholars Enrollment Simplification. So also known as 21st Century Scholar Auto Enrollment. I am, of all the things, I am most excited, I think, and most nervous for this one. This is something that I think has a great opportunity for our students. And some of my background, I started as a 21st Century Scholars Outreach Coordinator over the west side of the state. So saw 13 counties. I was in and out of schools. And it's a population that I am very passionate about. And I'm happy that we are pursuing this initiative. So just some backgrounds. I think most of you, hopefully all of you, know what the 21st Century Scholarship is, but if you don't, the 21st Century Scholarship is an early promise program that students who are in 7th and 8th grade and who are on free and reduced lunch, they can sign up, and as long as they agree to meet certain requirements, 2.5 GPA, Core 40, completing the Scholar Success Program, which are 12 activities in high school that will prepare them for college. As long as they agree to do all that and they live up to all those requirements, we will cover up to full tuition and fee and mandatory fees at a public institution and a different amount or an average of that at our private institutions. It is an amazing program that has changed the life of tens of thousands of Hoosiers. We actually had at the State Budget Committee presentation last week when we were in the room presenting, I knew just of who I knew, there were 3 21st Century Scholars in the room in professional capacities at that point. And I think across every boardroom and classroom and office in the state, there are 21st Century Scholars working and doing great things. The problem is too many students miss out on this opportunity. So before I talk about that, I want to talk about some of the great things that we've seen. Over 50,000 scholars have earned a college degree with the program since 1990. The program can be used for anything from a 1-year certificate all the way to a bachelor's degree. And 81% of 21st Century Scholars went to some sort of post-secondary education in 2020. Nearly 3 times the college going rate of their low-income peers, as you can see on the chart that we have here. The biggest problem, though, is fewer than half of eligible students enroll. And I am not a native Hoosier. I've lived in Illinois and Michigan and Iowa. And whenever I first moved here and applied to work with the 21st Century Scholarship Program, I was absolutely floored that our enrollment rate was only 50%. I know in other states, they would be chomping at the bit to enroll students and have this program. And I think that it's a shame that it's underutilized by so many individuals who could benefit from this for various reasons. So what the commission is, before I mention that, I do want to also mention that because of changes in the program over the last decade, we've seen significant increases in both college persistence and completion. Scholars are on pace to graduate at the same rate as their non-low income peers across the state. At some campuses, they exceed that, such as Ivy Tech. Scholars graduate at the highest rate of any population that attends at Ivy Tech. In addition to that, we know that there's more work to do to increase the persistence and completion rates for our 21st Century Scholars. But even before we increase it by 1 more student graduating, the state is already getting a significant return on its investment. It's actually a 10 times the return for each cohort that they invest in. And that's just the economic return on taxes, local spending, investing, items like that. That doesn't talk about the secondary benefits of lower utilization of SNAP, Medicaid, greater civic participation, items like that. So one also mentioned that we know it needs to improve, but already the state is getting an amazing return on investment from the 21st Century Scholars Program. So what we're proposing is a simplified or streamlined or automatic enrollment, whichever phrase you want to use. I think we've kind of landed more recently on simplified or streamlined enrollment because auto enrollment may mean something to other people. So I'll mention that. So what we would do is we would streamline the process by using information from the Indiana Department of Education. We were able to know who were on free and reduced lunch. We actually use the data is comes from the book fee waiver because we can't use free and reduced lunch data directly because of what are called community eligible schools where everybody receives free and reduced lunch. And what we would do for this process is we would mark all students as eligible. And this is exactly what we currently do for foster care students through a data share with Department of Child Services. We would mark every student who is eligible as eligible in our system, and then students would still have to come in and agree to the 21st Century Scholars Pledge and provide us some information so we can contact them and reach out to them and pair them with their FAFSA when they ultimately file the FAFSA their senior year. We anticipate this would drastically increase participation in the program. The reason we've kind of walked away a little bit from the automatic enrollment, and we'll see how the language works out in the coming months, is that some individuals thought that meant that students did not either have to meet the income qualifications, they do, did not have to meet the requirements over the course of their time in high school, they still do, and that they didn't have to agree to the Scholar Pledge, they still do. So they will still have to do those items, but what we've seen is those are not the barriers to students accessing the scholarship. What we've seen is it's the initial enrollment and requiring the parents to come in and provide their income. Now, we've greatly simplified the 21st Century Scholarship application this year, but it's still about 25 clicks to get from start to finish, and we know that's just too many for many of our families to sit down and do. So we're hoping that we can get that to 3, 4, 5, as well as make sure that the paper, which has already been fairly simplified application, is checking a box and signing a name, and we'll do all the verification on our end because we have the information. There's no reason to make the process even more difficult for students who are having to address other issues. So, excuse me. So with that, due to auto enrollment, we do not see the full fiscal hit happening until fiscal year 2031. The first cohort that would enroll would be in the academic year 27-28. That would be the first college enrollment year. So the first fiscal year with any sort of increased spending would be fiscal 28. Due to what's called carry forward, so we do not spend the full 21st Century Scholarship appropriation because we can only spend what is outlined in statute. So it's not like other programs that we can increase the amount of the award. It's outlined that it's tuition and fees. So if we do not have enough students using the appropriation, we roll money forward. But we do not anticipate needing additional funding in until fiscal year 30 because we'll be utilizing that carry forward program. And as I mentioned, the program is about $166 million appropriation, but we only spent in the $140 million range last year, with $20 million rolling over with roughly $33 million reserves. What we anticipate is we can build those reserves up so that we can ease in the cost of the program over the course of the next 7 years or 6 years. With that, before I talk about the Frank O'Bannon grant, I want to check the questions here. Will the student still be required in 7th or 8th grade, or can that occur in 9th grade or higher? Right now, we're anticipating 7th or 8th grade. There is a possibility to allow them to check the box a little bit later, but more to come on that as we look into legal implications around that one. How easy is it for 21st century scholars to understand which post-secondary institutions offer additional support, such as IUB's Covenant, Purdue Promise? Will these opportunities be seamlessly connected? So we are right now going through and creating a catalog of all the opportunities provided on each campus, such as IUB and Purdue Promise. The difficulty is not overwhelming the students because the scholarship is eligible at roughly 44, maybe 47, I can't remember off the top of my head, I apologize, campuses. And we cannot communicate directly to them each one. What we can do is create a guide on that one. I know the campuses reach out. Once we get that opportunity guide completed, I think it will go back on the website. We used to have one. I know they're updating on that, but we are going to be communicating that as best we can. It will be up to the different campuses for their students who are 21st century scholars to let the students know, like, so IUB letting them know about the covenant. Did I hear correctly that the 21st century scholarship can be used at private institutions? Yes, it can. The amount at private institutions is not the full amount. It's an average of the public institutions. So we take all of our public four-year campuses, average the cost for that, and that's the amount that a student can use the 21st century scholarship at a private institution. So, any other questions about this? It doesn't look like that. We will be working to provide updates, and there's more to come. I know I keep saying that, but there's more to come on this one as well, and hopefully right after the new year. So the Franco-Bannon grant. This is something that we worked on very hard last year to get updated, and we're really happy that it actually has come to fruition right now. So many of you have probably heard of the 21st Century Scholarship, and I'm guessing quite a bit fewer of you have heard of what's called the Franco-Bannon grant. The best way that I can describe it is that it's kind of like the Indiana Pell Grant. It is a need-based program that students apply for by filing the FAFSA. So students don't actually have to fill out an application. They complete the FAFSA each year, and we determine, based on the information we receive from the FAFSA, who is eligible for an award. And the amounts differ based on whether or not you're attending a public institution, a private institution, a for-profit institution, Ivy Tech. The amounts differ based on that. And it also differs based on need. The program helps, I mean, anywhere each year from 30 to 40,000, depending on how many students we have applied by the deadline each year. So this is one of, and oftentimes is the biggest financial aid award program for the commission, even bigger than the 21st Century Scholarship. However, the Franco-Bannon grant during the Great Recession, so back in 2008, 2009, had to make cuts. And it wasn't because the General Assembly cut funding. The General Assembly actually maintained funding for this. It's at that time, if you remember, there was just this huge run to attend post-secondary education due to the economic situation that we were facing. So during the 2008-2009 year, the maximum Franco-Bannon grant at a private institution was actually right around $9,200. And at a public institution, it was around $5,000. And that went a long way. Unfortunately, the next year, they were reduced to $6,300 and $3,500 at a public institution, just to keep up with demand and make sure there was funding for all the students who qualified. Over the course of the next decade, though, the awards have not caught up to where they were. So the current maximum base awards, and I'll talk about the max base awards on this. So this is the maximum amount they can get because there are incentives, which I'll mention a little bit. The maximum award right now as a private institution is $9,200. And when you look back at what it was in 2008, 2009, it was $9,160. So the spending power of that has been eaten away by inflation and the rising cost of post-secondary education. At a public institution, the maximum amount right now is $4,600. If you go back, it was at $5,080. So it's actually in nominal dollars lower than what it was during that academic year. So since 2009, in nominal dollars, private institutions have only increased by 0.4%. And then at public institutions, it's actually decreased by 9.4%. Now, I want to be clear, the amount of money from the General Assembly has actually gone up. It hasn't gone down. It's just that to keep up with demand, those cuts were made. But the maximum to bring the private institution amount back to the maximum base award from 2009, adjusted for inflation, we would have to have that set at $12,400. So, and we'll talk about that increase here in a second. Due to the declining college going rate, what we have seen is a reduced number of expenditures in this program. The appropriation sits at 100, again, just like the 21st Century Scholarship, right around 166, $167 million. In fiscal year 28, we saw it at 177, and it has dropped each year since, allowing us to build, again, a healthy rollover amount or a healthy amount unspent. But we don't want this money to go unspent. We want this money to help students enroll in college, afford college, decrease student debt, and persist and graduate. So with that, we brought it before the State Budget Committee, and the State Budget Committee actually supported a increase of 35% to the maximum Franco-Banning grant award. This brings us back to pre-recession levels when adjusted for inflation. So now at a private institution, the maximum amount is at $12,400 and $6,200 at a public institution. So these are significant increases that will greatly reduce the cost of post-secondary education for many of our need-based students. The Franco-Banning Grant Award, you can see here, and it's not the easiest chart to read, but it has the private, public, proprietary, and Ivy Tech broken down by each of the EFC levels. So the expected family contribution levels on the FAFSA and the amount each student can receive. I don't want to jump too far into this, but there's what's called on-time and full-time. You receive on-time your first year, and if you've completed 30 credits in the last year, receive the scholarship, and full-time if you've completed 24 or greater credits the last year that you received the scholarship on that. So with that, I think we have a few minutes left. I'm going to jump back into the questions here, and then I can open it up to discuss any other items that we have. Oh, before I jump into the questions, we would really appreciate those of you that are working directly with students to help communicate that this increase has happened. As you can see, for a full need student, if you're at a public institution, you receive $6,200 in Franco-Banning grant, and then another $6,800, let's say, in Pell Grant. There is not a public institution that you're attending that your full tuition fees are not covered between that, even if you're not a 21st Century Scholar. Matter of fact, the public 4-year, because Vincennes is grouped into that, the highest Franco-Banning grant at VU is actually more than their tuition and fees. So we are ecstatic about this increase. The other thing that I want to bring to note is if you've ever dealt with this grant before, it's a 35% increase for the top award. But as you go down especially at the public and the proprietary, the amounts actually increase by greater than 35%. Some of these are 200% increases when you get to the 3,501 to the 4,000 EFC range at the public institutions. We do not anticipate needing additional funding because of the rollover amounts, and we will be working to communicate this to students earlier each year. Appreciative of our public and private financial aid partners who are already doing a great job of getting the message out there for us. I know that they've been requesting files so they can communicate to these students that they are eligible for this funding, and hopefully we'll see positive enrollment based on that. So with that, do all high school students on free and reduced lunch meet eligibility for 21st Century Scholarship or Bannon? So for the 21st Century Scholarship at the high school level, you have to actually enrolled in 7th or 8th grade. For 21st Century Scholarship, the only way you can enroll after 7th or 8th grade is if a student is in the foster care system. That is allowed per state statute. Since it is an early promise program where you have to meet certain requirements and do certain activities, they do require that you complete those activities. I'm going to stop sharing my screen on this so I can see the chat here. So it does require. Now with the O'Bannon grant, it's a little bit more difficult to say whether or not every free and reduced lunch eligible high school student qualifies, because it's based on the FAFSA. And pretty much all of them should qualify. There may be a unique situation where they don't for one reason or another, but the vast majority of them will qualify for the Franco-Banning grant at their institution. So with that said, I think we have 1 minute left. Are there any additional questions? All right. Without that, I appreciate everyone joining us today for this session. I see a question from Eugene. Was that on purpose, Eugene? Oh, all right. With that, I do believe you have the links back to get back to the sessions. Zach, do you have the information on how they go ahead and get back to the next session?
So I put that in the chat early, but I can copy and paste it again.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and drop that back down
Sure.
into the chat, and I'm pulling it up as well. So for the next item which starts here, well, it's a lunch break right now, so back at 12:25. So with that, again, thank you all. Appreciate talking with you. If you have any questions, I'm also going to drop my direct email in the chat. Happy to answer any questions. Hopefully not all 100 of you email me though. So, all right, thank you. Zach, I'm gonna stop recording.
All right, thank you.